Hey everyone,
Hi.
Hello.
we are live. Let me try to share the screen. Can you see the screen,
Yep.
folks? Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Julia.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Can we just make a whole about it from this topic? Or it's something you.
Can you
how it's
repeat
supposed to?
this?
You just choose a very hot topic and we can start the whole, or need to tell us and just listen quietly and don't argue with you.
I think it's not about arguing. It's just like there are always two sides of each thing. So you have static, you have dynamic. I don't see any problems with dynamic languages, but this this presentation is more about static actually. So
Okay.
Hey everyone.
Hey.
We'll give a few more minutes for people to show up, and then we'll get rolling. What do you reckon? You think this is everyone?
I think there is also Ruslan Aliyev. I asked him if he gonna join us, and didn't receive any answer so far. I believe that Sean is sleeping
Yeah,
right now.
probably.
Probably Jay also. So.
Jay's on
Oh yes, he's
PTO in
yes,
Barcelona
yeah,
already.
That's right.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started?
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. Remember, this is mostly for sharing, so feel free to ask as many questions as possible, and don't feel like it needs to be formal or anything like that. And we'll just keep going until we don't feel like going anymore. We're blocked out for an hour and a half, but because there's only two of us talking this time, we don't really need to be too constrained. And if we get to the point where we're done with both sessions and somebody else wants to talk about something else, that's great. But otherwise, unless somebody has some questions before we get started, let's roll.
Yeah. Actually thought that this talk might be boring or something like that, so I tried to make it a little silly. Yeah, today I wanted to talk about static and dynamic languages, mostly on examples of JavaScript and Haskell, because I think they're both good examples of dynamic typing and static typing. So let's start. So I don't know the audience, so some parts may be very obvious for some people, and some parts may not be. So ask the question. So type system, what's that? It's a collection of rules. I just took this from Wikipedia. So all my talk, all my presentation is from Wikipedia. So type system is a collection of rules that assign a property called type to various constructs a computer program consists of, such as variables, expressions, functions, or modules. So yeah, I think everybody is familiar with this thing. It's just a definition what type system is. So static versus dynamic. So versus, here word versus, I'm answering Igor's question, is not about holy war. It's usually these things live, like for example, if we say Java, for example. I'm sorry, someone hit my car, I guess. Sorry. 1 minute, please. I'm sorry, it was an alarm on my car. So static versus dynamic. So yeah, statically typed languages like Java don't have any dynamic things, but some parts of Java, like if you use reflection, you can say it's something like dynamic. Purely dynamic languages like Python, JavaScript, Ruby, Clojure, and many others, they check type safety at runtime. So what does it mean? Basically, big plus of statically typed languages is that many bugs can be caught earlier in the development cycle using compiler, some additional type checkers, and something like this. So it's better. Dynamic languages are more handy when you need to hack something pretty quickly, and You need to don't think about types. You just write your program. So you don't. If you imagine when you write code in Java, for example, you need to write many type definitions, something like list of something of something of something, and this is like you need to type types. Let's talk a little bit about JavaScript. JavaScript, it's like definition. Brendan Eich reads upon every mistake ever made in designing programming language, invents a few more, and creates live script. Later, in an effort to cash in on the popularity of Java language, it's renamed to JavaScript. So you can read this thing. It's from Brief and Complete and Mostly Wrong History of Programming Languages. So talking about JavaScript, you probably may know that it's not ideal at all, I think, as other languages also. But there are so many weird things in JavaScript, so we can say that there are pretty big amount of mistakes. Jay, what's the question? Can I notice? Yes.
I want to share. I want to share one interesting opinion from Java guy. He said that I'm about dynamic versus static.
Mm-hmm.
He said that on Java, if you finally write a Java program, most of the cases it will work.
Most of the cases.
But on Python, you absolutely don't sure will it work or not. Such way he understand dynamic with static typization.
I don't agree about Java. I would say about Haskell that if you manage to write a Haskell program, in most cases it will work. But about Java, there are exceptions, side effects, and many other things. Yeah, but in general, I do agree with you. Okay, so let me show you some examples how JavaScript works. Where is my, okay. Can you see the terminal window? Folks?
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
We can see.
Yeah, so let's start with null and undefined. So null is undefined, but if you use another type of equality in JavaScript, it's not the same thing. Let's go further. False equals 0. False even equals character version of 0. And 0 also equals character version of 0. And empty array is also 0. It's 1 plus 2 is 3. And we know that character and non-character are pretty much the same, so 1 is 1. And we can try to do 1 plus 2, it's 12. Cool. What about multiplication? 2 and 1, not a number. But if we do plus, it's concatenating things. So not very obvious.
I love JavaScript.
Yeah. So as dict in Python, JavaScript defines objects with these brackets. So this is like an object in JavaScript. So you can have a sum of two objects, and this is object. Sum of two arrays is empty string. And you can try to summarize object and array, and it's an object. What about 1 plus 2 and 2 plus 1? Okay, they are the same. But what about array and object? Oh, the same as well. Strange, because in my browser it was not the same. Anyway, let's go ahead and have some fun with floats. So 0.1 is 0.1. 0.1 plus 0.1 is 0.2. What about 0.1 plus 0.2? No. So I think it's everything about JavaScript that I wanted to show you. Let's switch back to the presentation. Cool. So you've seen this weird things in JavaScript. So let's switch a little bit to Haskell. Haskell, it's also like part of this brief and incomplete history. A committee formed by Simon Peyton Jones, Paul Haddock, Philip Wadler, Ashton Kutcher, and people for the ethical treatment of animals creates Haskell, pure, non-strict functional language. It gets some resistance due to complexity of using monads to control side effects. Wadler tries to appease critics by explaining that a monad is a monoid category and the functors. What's the problem? So I don't know whether you are familiar with this thing, which is called monad, but it's pretty hard to understand what's that. Anyway, we're not going to talk about monads here, but yes, I'm answering Igor's notice. Yeah, Igor, you are right, and it's about dynamic typing, but yes, in Python you'll not have this big amount of things because Python is dynamically but strongly typed, and JavaScript is weakly typed, I think. Anyway, it was about silly thing showing that JavaScript has this lols. Okay, so yeah, no problems with monads. Let's go ahead. So Haskell is statically typed, functional, and lazy. We're not going to talk about lazy stuff, but let's talk about statically typed. So semicolon T is semicolon T is like, please print me a type. So type of a char is char, type of Boolean true is Boolean, type of string is array or list of chars. This is a tuple of Boolean and char. And here I showed you type of T operation. And here how to read it. This is A, and A. A is a type, and it's like a generic type because plus is a generic operation which can be used for not just integers but for floats and for strings, for any other type. You can even redefine plus for your own type. So plus here is for numeric values because A, you can see I've underlined this thing, A should be a numerical value. It's like an implementation of an interface. So it's a generic type definition of function that takes one argument, another argument, and produces the result with the same type as two arguments. So it's not very obvious from the first point of view, but this is a type definition like used in Haskell, OCaml, and other ML family languages. So equality in Haskell is pretty much like obvious because 1 equals true returns you like type error, but it's not runtime. I think it's compile time, but since it's I took this from Haskell Interactive, you cannot say for sure. So, but it's compile time error because you cannot use this operation with two different types. So that's obvious as well. Let me show you an example how this works. Maybe you know this function which is called head. It takes very first element of the list, which is called head. So let me switch back to the terminal window. Okay. Yeah. So here I have Haskell Interactive and head. So here is my list. You can see the type of the list. Type is list of generic type T, because 1, 2, or 3 can be treated as int or integer. So it depends on context in which this expression is used. But anyway, if I define 1 as int, for example, it's this expression is explicit type definition. So if you want, for example, this will be list of int. So what about head? Head is a function that takes a list and returns a single value of a generic type. So let's try head into 3, 2, and 3. Yeah. So let's try head from the empty list, and it's an exception. And I can say that it's a runtime exception. And from the type system point of view, Haskell has nothing to do with this exception. That's why it's a runtime exception, because Haskell checks types on the compilation, and types, as we see here, are correct. So empty list is an instance of a list, so no problem with this, but it generated runtime exception. But there is a special category of functional programming languages which have so-called dependent types. Dependent types is very interesting area to discuss, but I'll try to show you rather than trying to explain you. So this is language which is called Idris. It's pretty much the same as Haskell, has very similar syntax, but it has this thing which is called dependent types. Dependent type is a type that depends on its value. So basically, you cannot apply head function in Idris to an empty list. It will generate you a compilation error. So let's try just head for like simple list. So yeah, it works the same way as in Haskell. So it returns, but for empty list, it will say that it cannot find a value of type non-empty in these brackets. Non-empty, as I understand, I'm not very big expert in dependent types and in Irish language as well, but non-empty is a subtype or variant of a list type. So this is like a subtype of list which is called non-empty, and there is no such type instance for non-empty with empty list. So it cannot compile at all. Let's get back to the presentation. Okay, so yeah, as I already said, Idris is a general purpose pure functional language with dependent types. Dependent types allow types to be predicated on values. So I hope it's understandable. This is, I think, the last example for today. It's about append function. So append function, how it works. It is in context of lists, so it concatenates list to a list. So here we go. I hope it's obvious. So this is how append function looks in Haskell. So appending list to list. So we have a list, we have another list, and we're appending, and as a result we're getting another list, which is a result of concatenating these two lists. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we'll get the result list. And the same thing with empty lists. So as an example, I also put adding element to list, because in next slides I'll show you the implementation of this append function, how it can be implemented. This semicolon operation is appending element to a list. So we have an element, we have list, and as a result we're getting another list which has an element in its head, this new element, and original list as tail. So naive implementation in Haskell will be like this. Let me explain. So this is a function definition, I would say. So this is function type. In Haskell, you define functions depending on it's like big switch case, let's say. So if you call append function with empty list and something like and another list, it will return you a list. In another case, if you're not using empty list, so we are destructuring this list to head, tail, and second list, appending head and recursively calling this operation on the tail and another list. So is it obvious? So can you please say yes or no?
It's okay.
It's okay. It's okay. Cool. So this is like pretty small amount of code, and you see x's, y's, x, y, but since we are all human beings, we can make mistakes. Imagine if I did like this. So from the type safety perspective, it will compile and it even will work. But it will not be correct. So what we can do with dependent types. So this is append in Idris. So in dependent types will have not just type like list, we'll have list of 2 or list of 3, and it's like different types. So here we have this function declaration, and I'm using vector here for some reason. I don't know why I did this, but anyway, I'm using vector here. Never mind. Imagine this is a list. So function declaration. So here is vector m is the length of the list of the vector, n is length as well. And in this type declaration, we are saying that the result list should be m plus n length. And the implementation is pretty much the same. The naming of the operations is a little bit different. Here we have 2 semicolons instead of 1 in Haskell, and plus plus. Yeah, I think I needed to put here word append instead of plus plus, but anyway, implementation is pretty much the same. And if we try to do access append access, it will generate you a compilation error because you will be trying to do a thing which is not correct in terms of these dependent types. So let me show you how it will generate this compilation error. So okay. So yeah, let's start with first and okay. So pretty obvious. But if we try to do the same but with an error, it will work, but it will not work correctly. So you can see it doesn't work. So let's go to Idris and try to do the same. Unfortunately, Idris does not support multi-line definitions, so I will be using single line definition. Yeah. So now it should work. As you can see, it generates a vector of 5 elements of type integer. Let's try to break this thing, and instead of appending x's to y's, let's append x to x. And we can see that it generated compilation error, checking type of append, no such variable vector. Oh, sorry, it's not that. Whoa. Now the error is much more interesting. So yeah, it says that specifically type mismatch between plus and kn. I don't even know what's that, but anyway, this thing allows us to reason on more higher category and write programs in more safe manner. But unfortunately, this thing, which is Idris, is not very mature. It's just like research language. There are other implementations of dependent type systems in Agda and Coq, as I remember, but these things are not very popular. But what we can say that many interesting concepts from functional languages migrated to like general purpose languages like Java, C#, Python. Like garbage collection was originally in Lisp. Lambdas and other functional concepts also migrated. So maybe we can see that in some nearest or not very nearest future that these dependent types will be present in some way in next generation of Java or C# or I don't know, Scala. So I guess that's it. Switch back to my presentation if I don't have any slides. So yeah, questions.
So I'm wondering if you've have you had any experience with static type checkers like MyPy?
No, actually, I just read and played a little bit with it, but this thing actually is interesting. It's a graduated type system implementation, so you can use dynamic typing and static typing in the same place. But as per my opinion, problem here is if you write half of your program in dynamic fashion, half of your program in static fashion, you will not be sure that it's correct. So you, for example, you can just write without types and it will work. But I hope that there is something like strict mode when you need just to type to write types everywhere, and it will not allow you to miss this type declaration. So yeah, I think it's a big step forward, because things like MyPy and TypeScript, by the way, it's a superset of JavaScript. It works pretty much the same as MyPy. Do pretty good job, because if you have types, your refactoring tools work for you, not against you. So I think.
Yeah, I had kind of the same reaction when I was looking at MyPy, was that it's interesting, but unless you were using it all the time, it was just going to cause trouble.
Yeah, because you can just stop declaring these types, get back to like old Python style without types, and so it will just work because it's Python runtime. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have another question. You mentioned this Idris language. I didn't hear about this, and about the dependent types. I wonder, do you have some more experience with it? Because it seems like a cool feature on the one hand, and on the other hand, I'm concerned that you'll probably move some implementation details on the interface level, because when you just write the signature of the function, you're just saying that there will be some thumb or subtraction and so on.
Yeah, it depends.
So
yeah, actually,
you wrote some.
Yeah, I wrote some stuff just like to play around with this thing, just actually to understand how it works. Because when I first read about this dependent types, I was shocked, because I was not understanding the core concept. So yeah, I played around with this thing, but I haven't written big programs with this. The same as in Haskell, because it's pretty hard to do this. It's much faster if you want to hack around something. It's much faster to do this in Python. Exactly.
And back to the Idris, can we introduce some, I don't know, non-standard dependent function? I mean, not just like addition, but maybe some sort of custom functions that will set constraint on the type.
Yeah. So basically, I will not do this thing, but basically what you can do is you can define a function that will return you a type. So it will take something like value and will return a type. And you can use this function as a predicate in your function specification.
And the next one, what about the static typing? I mean, it seems like the values that you, I mean, if you, for instance, spot the sum tuple of two integers, you set the type to be value b, and to be greater than value a. This value may come from the user input, and at this time, it's not about static, or you can pass the.
Yeah, good question. I have no exact answer to your question, actually, because I wasn't dealing with user inputs in Idris at all. So it's it's like it was just first presentation, probably in series. If you like this topic, I can try to make more deeper like presentations about this thing. So it was just like pilot version. So I tried a little bit play with this thing. I was not trying to write like web server or client server application in Idris because it will be like a hell.
Yeah, and I've even heard about this stuff. I will probably try to do some thinking on my own side.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Igor, if I understand your question correctly, Idris actually didn't check values, but it checks some signs that one number are less or greater than another. So it.
Yeah, but if you want to check that the second value is greater than the first one, and this defines a new type. The type should be checked on the compilation time, not in runtime.
Yes. Yes.
And what if these values come from some user input, something like that? I wonder what will happen. Do we have some, I don't know, exception, or we can use if we deal with user input and so on? This was the essence of my question.
Yeah, good question. Any other questions?
Oh, so Vova, what was the purpose of your talk? Did you just want to show us some kind of features related to different languages, or just so? What was the main idea of the kind of this talk?
Like fun.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I wanted to share like pretty nice experience and new ideas in modern programming languages. That's it. So it's not about like let's go and write all the code in enterprise readiness in Idris. No.
Okay.
Maybe
we're
there's
gonna
some hollywars.
rewrite OpenStack in Haskell. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Actually, there was such proposal for Summit. Did you know, Chris?
Oh yeah.
Yes, there was proposal to make it in Haskell, to make it in Java, and there were some other languages. And each summit, some new language appears, and some guy just proposed to write OpenStack in some new language.
Yeah, I heard statement that a good programmer should learn one new language a year.
Yeah.
I wonder who has time for that. Do we want to take like a couple minutes break and then we'll come back here shortly?
Yes, but may I also kind of add some critics to Vova? Vova, sorry for that.
Welcome.
Just guys, as we. So we're going to have this knowledge sharing for some long time, and this is a very good practice. But let's make our talks kind of well structured. So let's just kind of do some spoilers at the very beginning, just to kind of tell about the purpose. The main topics of it and something like that, just to make it easy to follow all the ideas. So
you mean before the talk, like we?
Yes, like so. Yes, today I'm gonna talk about this, and I'm gonna show this, and you shouldn't spoil all the things, all the details, but in general, some main
so people
ideas.
can get prepared.
Is this a bad thing or good thing for you?
So you propose to
No. I mean, at the beginning of your speech, not just day or week before the speech, just at the very beginning. So just, I think this is a good kind of thing for good practice for reading lectures or creating talks.
So
Yeah.
basically, you're just saying introduce the topic a little more clearly so that
Yes,
people know what to expect over the next several minutes.
Yes, and make it easy to follow, because you can understand different things in different ways, and you sometimes you can just lost in if the subtopic is too long, you can just get lost in the middle of it because you don't know the main idea, and probably you can start thinking about some off-topic things. So. And lose focus. So
yeah, that seems like a good idea.
Okay.
Okay. Do we want to take a short break and then be back here in just a couple minutes, and I'll do mine?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes.
That's. I'm back.
I'm here.
Is that going to be legible?
Sorry, are you asking, can I see your screen?
Yeah. Is it readable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, guys, are we ready? Are we waiting for someone? Just let's kind of add plus in the chat, if plus sign, I mean, if you are ready. So just to make sure everyone is here.
So we miss Vova?
Yeah.
Vova and Ruslan, I believe. So let's wait for a while. Vova is the last one.
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Great. Does anybody remember how to make the pictures of everyone's faces drop off the bottom of the Hangout?
Yeah, I face the same problem, but I don't know. Probably you should. Let's.
I did it earlier, but I don't know how.
There is a button in the upper tool, like when it's near the muting the microphone camera. Hide participants, show participants.
Ah, there it is. Thank you. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started since everyone's back. I don't have any slides, but to give you an idea of what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about Gabby, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. And then when after I'm done introducing it, I'm going to give a little canned demo of how it works and what it can do. And then after that, I'll also show how I've been using it to do some live testing against the dev stack of the resource provider's work that has been happening upstream, as that provides yet a sort of a different perspective on how Gabby's works and how it's useful. So when I started working on OpenStack about 2.5 years ago, I had come from mostly web development, mostly working on web APIs for kind of a long time. And one of the first things I noticed when I started working on OpenStack was that even though the documentation for the APIs was rather huge in length, it wasn't very good as a developer if you were trying to figure out how to associate a URL in that API with a piece of code somewhere in the system. I started out in Ceilometer, and it was in that environment. Pecan was the web framework that was being used, and there's no explicit connection between the URLs and the code. You sort of figure it out by figuring out the object hierarchy that's going on. When I switched over to Nova, the situation got even more fuzzy and unclear because, I mean, well, Nova's huge and there are millions of URLs and there are lots of different ways in which they're managed. So as a developer and as someone who wants to use the code as a way of learning, having that association between the URLs and the code and the test was something that was pretty important to me. And so when the opportunity showed up in Ceilometer to create a testing tool for testing the APIs, I wanted to create something that was really focused on the web interaction and the URLs that were being used and the actual HTTP requests and responses, rather than on the Python code that does the testing. The important parts to me were the code that actually manages the requests and the requests themselves. The testing code is not something that I wanted to get in the way. So I started working on this thing within the Ceilometer code itself that was going to use YAML as a way of writing web requests and response and testing of the responses from those requests. And I quickly discovered that doing it within that code base was crazy. And so I started working on this side project that I ended up calling Gabby, which is essentially a tool for doing declarative testing of HTTP APIs. The name Gabby is a play on a British term for somebody who talks a lot. And the idea was that Gabby lets you see all the talking. So basically what it is a way to associate those YAML files, that the YAML files that declare the web requests, with either a testing harness like test repository, subunit, all those sorts of things that are used in OpenStack, or just run against a command line tool, which can talk to any web server. So in this little demo that I'm going to run, can you see that now? There's 3 panes on the screen here. The one on the left is going to be the output from the tests that run. The larger thing on the right is going to be a verbose display of what the web requests are, and down at the bottom is just the log from a simple web server that's running. That web server is basically a very, very simple object storage system that just stores files in containers, a little bit like what Swift does, but since this is doing it in RAM, it doesn't need to be very complicated and it's just very simple. I'll just leave it at that. So over there on the left-hand side is a very, very simple example of what a Gabby test looks like. It's a list of tests with names. So the first test is called simple request, that requests a URL, and you can set some options. For example, in this case, we're telling it to be verbose about the headers. Over on the right-hand side, we see that it made a request to my web server on port 8000, and it got back a response of 200 OK. In the test on the left, there is no explicit evaluation of the response. If that's not set, then what it's testing is to see whether or not it got a status 200. So in this case, it did, so the test passed. Here's a little more complicated example. What this one does is test to make sure that an expected string is in the response. So the response strings key there in the test is looking for that paragraph that says this is the front page of the Gabby demo application in the response. And you can see on the right in the request and response that that string is in fact there. So of course the test passed. Excuse me. You can use lots of different methods. You don't have to always use get. You can use delete and post and all those things. So here in this example, we're trying to delete the front page of my web app, which isn't allowed. So we get a 405 response, and that's checked with the status key there. And we can check the response headers to see that there is a response header that is an allow header with a value of post and get. And you can see that again on the right. Now we're going to put something into the server. We're going to create a container named a shed, and we're going to give it an owner of the name Sam. So what's happening there is that the data key, can you guys see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay, so the data key here is a dictionary that gets transferred into whatever the appropriate form is for the content type declared in the request header. So here we've declared that our request is going to have a content type of application JSON. Here we have a dictionary with a key owner with a value Sam, and you can see that JSON right there in the put request. We get a 201 response saying that it was created, and that response has a location header which gives you the URL of the thing that was created. Gabby has the capacity to reuse that value of location using what it calls a substitution variable, $location in this case, to be the URL of the next request. That next request shows one of the other features, which is that you can evaluate a JSON response with what's called a JSON path, which is a standard for querying JSON. So in this case, it's saying, look at the root of the object, and then look at the owner key and check that its value is Sam. You can see here in this body that that is the case. So both of those tests pass. Here we're now going to put something in the container that we created. So we had the shed, and the shed has a URL called objects that we're going to post our new object into. In this case, it's a bit of data about a car. That's a Honda. And again, it's JSON. But we're doing something a little more complicated in testing the response headers. Since we don't know what the UUID of the thing that's being created is going to be, we need to use a regular expression. So here, we're seeing several things happening. One is that the value of a header can be a regular expression by wrapping it in a /. The other are two new substitutions, one called $scheme, which corresponds with HTTP in this case, and netloc, which is the host and port of the web server. That just allows us to check that the location header is everything we expect it to be. And here again, we're just evaluating the response headers and the JSON path on the new object that we've created. It doesn't always have to be structured data that you're using in the data section of a request. In this example, we're reading a file from disk. How that file is sent to the server is dependent on the content type that you set in the request header. In this case, it's a picture of a kitten. And we see here that when it's created, it will have a response of the URL of that kitten. If I felt like it, I could show you that kitten in the server, but I won't do that yet. I'll save that for a moment. You can address lists in JSON paths. This list is returning a list that this request is returning a list of objects. In this case, there's only one in it, but we can just look at the last object in that list by indexing the list and see that the object is a kitten. This feature allows you to, excuse me, to do a JSON path query on the body of the previous response in order to create a URL or some other value in this test. So this list objects tests are created this response body. And now that value, the $object0, is being used here to create the delete request. This allows you to do sort of hypermedia style requests where you're not actually being aware of everything that's in the request and the response, but you're still using that information. there's a new feature, a relatively new feature in Gabby was that you, instead of using the URL key with an explicit method statement, you can now say the method and the URL, which just saves a bit of time and is a bit tidier. Okay, now I will show you the kitten because everyone wants to see a kitten. Let's see. Share my screen again. No. There it is. There, the kitten is in the shed, like we said it would be. This image comes back from the first time Jay and I did any work together. He had a presentation about, it was he was presenting about API consistency, and I was presenting about Gabby, and he used a lot of puppies in his presentation. So I thought that having kittens in my presentation would be a nice variety. So before I move on to the next section, are there any questions?
Actually, yes. It's about this variables like location and others. So they always from the last request. So it's so you cannot move ahead from 3 requests and get variables.
Right. So at the moment, the way the code works is that any of those variables only refer to the most recent request. And so that each request is run in a sequence. And when run as in an actual test harness, each individual YAML file is considered a test suite, but it's an ordered test suite. So the idea there is that the YAML file is describing a single interaction that you would have with the web server. Like, I want to create an object, check that the object is there, destroy the object, and then confirm that the object is not there. And you want all those things to happen in order. And what you're describing is a feature that's been asked for quite a lot, but implementing it would be painful, and it would also make it really easy to make YAML files that are really hard to read, because you would have to constantly be bouncing around in the file in order to be able to tell what any particular substitution was referring to. It's already hard enough with the substitutions to know what they mean, but to add a stack of them would be difficult.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Chris, what if we have some more complex check, just not a strict equal, but something
pattern or
there? Or is supported. You can say in a response header check, you can say this or that, like, which is useful, especially when you have something that might be in a different order. You know, the order is not predictable, but it's 2 things. You can just do this and that, or that and this. And then for anything that you can't actually do with the existing features, there's a concept called content handlers, which allow you to add whatever kinds of checks you want using your own code. And basically, you write a class which is a subclass of the content handler, and that allows you to create a new key in the test. So say you wanted to evaluate HTML, not JSON. You could write a content handler that would parse the response data into a DOM and then do DOM-based path queries into that to check to see that things are there. So far, nearly everything that's needed to be done has been based on JSON, and in that setting, if you need to do fuzzy values, you can do regular expressions, and there are also ways to do sorting, filtering, and things like that. So there's quite a lot of capability there. I just just showed the basics.
Okay, I see. And one more question. You have several tests in one YAML file, and as I understand, it can be one test can depend on another. And for example, in Nova, you can run only one test, just with regexp or something.
Yeah. So.
And in this case, we will run all YAML file, or
No. What happens in that case is, and this is one of the things that made Gabby a lot more complicated than it was initially planned, was because I was writing it specifically to work well with the way OpenStack testing is done. And so in that scenario, if you request just one test, that test will start up and see that the test that was prior to it was not run, which itself will look through all the priors and go up to the top of the graph and run all the tests up until the one you want, and then stop. And will only report on the results of the one test you requested.
Okay, I see.
So the dependency tree gets followed, but only up to the point of the one test that you want. The other concern that people usually have in that same kind of situation is what happens in concurrency environments. And again, the way to deal with that in the OpenStack environment is in there's this tester.conf file. It has this group regex. So here we're grouping each individual Gabby YAML file into its own group, which means that the concurrency system will make sure that those are all in the same process. So that prevents a kind of amusing bug, which is that it splits up all the tests across all the processors, and then because it's testing for the priors, it runs all the tests multiple times, which results in a lot of confusion and mess. If you have one of these group regex settings, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's cool information. Thanks.
So, anything else before I move on?
Chris, as far as I remember, you had some plans to kind of use Gabby in no testing. So, do you still have these plans, or am I mistaken?
So the placement API that is now in Nova is fully tested in with Gabby. There's
oh, so you did already?
Yeah, somewhere. There's these several files are Gabby files that run against the placement API and test to make sure it does the right thing.
Okay.
There was a plan to try and use Gabby to replace the API samples tests, but that was considered a step too far by a lot of the Nova people because it would change too much in one go, and people were concerned about that.
Okay. So because of that, you just can't do many things in one YAML. You're just not using all the features you have. Is it right?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand your question.
I mean, you said that people are concerned about the way that too many things happens in one go.
Oh no, I meant in terms of changing Nova too much in one go.
Oh, okay, got it.
Because, like, you know, everyone's used to the API samples. Well, everyone who's been with Nova for a long time is used to the API samples tests and thinks that they're normal. If you're new to Nova and you look at the API samples tests, of course, you're like, what the hell is this? Which is the same reaction people have to Gabby. So to me, it's kind of one or the other. And to me, Gabby's a lot more readable, but of course I'm the author, so, you know, I'm going to feel that way.
Does the Gabby have possibility to write same things on Python, not on YAML?
So the code within Gabby that parses the YAML and creates the Python tests that are actually getting run can take any input. So you could create tests on the fly by generating dictionary structures that are the same as the YAML that is read, if you wanted to. The difficulty with that is dealing with the way test collection is done by the test runners, which turns out is a really messy process. And because early on there was some ideas about dynamically creating tests on the fly, dependent on how the tests happened that ran before it. But that doesn't work very well because of test collection, which is a different process. You collect the tests, and then you choose which tests you want to run, and then you run them. So that process, because there's no test running happens after collection, so it's hard to do. It's basically what I'm trying to say. All right, so now I will show a little YAML file that I use to check to see that the placement API is behaving as I expected in running DevStack. So I've got DevStack running at the moment on a VM here. I have which basically just does some things to make sure that you can create resource providers and make allocations against them. And I can explain what those resource providers things mean as people need me to. But for now, I'll just go into the Gabby sides of things. So this file is a single Gabby suite, and it uses the defaults functionality, which basically means all of these settings will be used in every request afterwards, unless they are overridden in the specific test. This is useful for making sure that every request has an auth token, and every request is expecting JSON both in the request and the response. This environ substitution here looks in the operating system's environment variables for environment variable called token. I'll set that up in a minute to see so you can see what that actually is. But that just gets read as the YAML is being processed and then pushed into the value. Not as the YAML is being processed, but as the tests are being processed. So the first thing our tests will do is make a new resource provider with a UUID that we're going to provide to the test from the environment. Confirms that it was created. And then it looks in the response to the inventories URI to make sure that there aren't any inventories yet. Then it creates some disk inventory, because what we're creating is some awesome shared disk, not just boring shared disk, but awesome shared disk that have a lot of space and is going to reserve 256 gigabytes for other use. This last URL expansion or substitution expands to the URL used in the previous request. Once we have some inventory, we're then going to check and see if any of it's used and confirm that none of it is used. Then we're going to allocate against that inventory this case, this value here is the identifier of the consumer of the resource, and this is the identifier of the resource being consumed. We're going to consume 10 gigs of our awesome shared disk, and it'll return a 204 indicating that that was successful. And then once we're done with that, we'll check the usage, and we'll see that we're using 10 gigs. First, I need to make sure that I'm authed up properly. And I'll put my token into that token variable. And I'll also make sure that I know where the placement API endpoint is in my dev stack. And then I'll use Gabby run command line client, which basically allows you to run any YAML file against either a host that you specify, in this case, what's in the value of dollar placement, or against hosts that are specified in the YAML file itself. The RP UUID is the random UUID we're going to be using for this test run, and it's doing it this way just so we can run the test over and over again. I've turned on verbose in the defaults, so we're going to see a lot of output now, and we'll go back through the output as it happens. So all the tests passed. There were 6 of them. And if we scroll back here, we just get the verbose output of what happened. So we posted our new resource provider. It came back with the URL that we wanted. We used that URL to make our request, and then we posted some inventory and checked on the inventory and carried on from there. Now, some things we can do here to make this a little more informative is we go back into the YAML file, and instead of using verbose headers, we can just do verbose true, which will turn on velocity, and run it again. And now we'll see, oops, where are we at? There we go. We'll see the JSON bodies that are involved. So here are the name and the UUID of the resource provider we're creating. The fact that there's no inventory. The inventory that we're setting, what that inventory becomes after it's been set, no usage, making an allocation, and then the usage being 10 because we made an allocation of 10. As you can see, there's not really very much complicated JSON handling going on here. It's really just simple checks of the values to do, sanity checks of what's there. You can do much more complicated checks than this, but it's not that useful for the kinds of tests that are doing here. This is just smoke tests to make sure that things don't explode. In the Gabby code itself, the tests that it uses to test itself do all kinds of fancy JSON path handling that really isn't useful here. Let's see. I guess that's it. What else can I tell you? What more questions do you have?
I don't have any questions actually. Everything is pretty clear. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it looks really nice, but to have more question, we have to try it, you know, because in your demo everything was good and smooth, you know.
Yeah.
So really nice application.
So you can install Gabby with pip. It's just pip install Gabby. The docs are at gabby.readthedocs.io. And the GitHub repo is cdent/Gabby. And it's It works very well for what it does, but it is also riddled with little tiny bugs and things like that, like most software. So if you see something wrong with it when you're playing with it, if you get a chance to play with it, then of course issues or pull requests are very, very welcome. I'm hoping to start using Gabby a bit more outside of Nova. I know that the people in Ironic are interested in trying it. And also there's been some talk of the API working group writing a suite of Gabby files that sort of would do what amounts to guideline compliance testing of any service. I think that may be harder than people think it might be, but it's something that we're going to at least try if we get the time.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
The first one is, as far as I understand, the Gabby is like a standalone tool, and in order to run my checks, I need to fully work on the server, right? There is like a working API instance, and I run Gabby in parallel. That's correct?
That's not quite true, actually.
Okay.
So I'll just show you how it's used in
I'm
Nova.
just looking for possibility to do not run the actual server and probably use the Flask's test application instance and something like that.
So the way it works in Nova and the telemetry projects is that Gabby's instructed to use WSGI intercept to host the WSGI application directly, but not run an actual server. So let's see here. I just show you that.
And as for programming interface, can I use, I don't know, Gabby's library in my unit test and just open YAML Gabby?
Well, that's this file that I'm not sharing my screen right now, am I? Hold on just a second.
No, actually no.
Okay, and another question is any plans? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is the test loader that's used in Nova. So this is Python code that tells what tests to load, and also uses the intercept feature that's built into Gabby, so that we're loading the WSGI application but not running an actual server. So there's no true socket communication going on here. The communication happens over fake sockets, but it is real HTTP requests over those fake sockets.
Okay, that's good. So I can actually use the Gabby's, I don't know, to without unicorn and other stuff.
Yes.
Okay, and that's cool. Thank you. And another question is there any probably plans to integrate with Swagger or OpenAPI? So I don't know, maybe check the REST JSON schemas that are defined here, something like that.
There's been some talk of that, but there hasn't been any real progress on it because no one has had an immediate need to do it. One of the things that I was hoping that could happen at some point was that if you had an existing Swagger file, that some transform could be done on that to automatically create Gabby tests, either statically, like just output a YAML file, or even just on the fly. It ought to be possible because all the information is there, but it's just simply a matter of it not having happened yet. And there's a slight difference in the sort of mental model that Swagger wants to use compared to the one that Gabby's already using. Gabby's very oriented towards request response, whereas Swagger is more interested in describing the actual API.
That's absolutely right. But so I don't propose to generate tests from the OpenAPI. I mean that it could be like a good addition when you want to do a quick check on the type checking, response format, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. That was quite interesting.
Anybody else?
Test generating was sound like VSDL. If you remember VSDL scheme for SOAP protocol, it have possibility to generate client.
Can you say that again?
I don't know. Do you remember SOAP protocol and
Oh, SOAP. Yeah.
VSDL scheme for that? And it has possibility to generate client automatically from scheme.
Mm-hmm. I did that once. I don't ever want to do it again. No, I used to like SOAP, but then I got better. I think that from my personal standpoint, a lot of people react to things like WSDL files and Swagger files and even Gabby's YAML files at wanting to do more with them than they were originally intended for. And so much of the development process in Gabby has been resisting the temptation to turn it into a tool that does all kinds of magical stuff for APIs, and trying to keep it focused on the one relatively simple task of managing what are hopefully somewhat readable tests of HTTP, and keeping that as clean as possible.
Yeah. So thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everybody else.
I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, we've reached our hour and a half. So if anybody has any ideas on how to make the next one better, besides the ideas that Dimo already had, send some mail to the group list, and we'll just try and integrate that with the next time. I'm not sure when the next time will be yet. Probably won't try and schedule that until after we come back. Those of us who are going to Summit come back from Summit, and we have a better idea of what things look like after today's call that I'm sure we're all just really looking forward to. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Chris, when all Summit stuff will be over?
Summit's just all of next week.
Okay.
So I think I will be gone all of next week and then off the following Monday just to recover. And I think Jay will be back like normal on that Monday. Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Laura. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.